Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And in this episode, we're going to continue and finish up the Universal Carry holster. And it's universal. This is unloaded. It's universal because you can use this holster for any size pistol, semi-automatic pistol. You can use it for a revolver, and it'll hold large and medium size pistols. So it's very handy if you want to carry. You get used to this holster. It's lightweight, it's very small, easy to conceal, and you can switch your carry gun without switching your holster, and makes it very economical, so you don't have to go out and buy a holster or make a specific holster for each and every gun that you want to carry. So we're going to finish this up today, so come on in and let's get started. Alright, on the last episode we had cut this out from the pattern that we made on the first episode, and cut our belt slits in here, did a little bit of beveling on the outside where the gun goes in and out. We did bevel both sides to kind of round that off, then we burnished it. And then off camera, between then and now, I went ahead and dyed both pieces. So both pieces are dyed. They were punched previously in the last video for stitching. So we're ready to go ahead and put these together and wrap this up. One thing that I do want to go over in this video is I want to do a double lock stitch at the beginning, and I am going to saddle stitch this with 2 needles, but I'm going to do a double lock stitch at the beginning, and then at the end on each side I'm going to show you how I terminate that so that you can't see any of your finished knots or anything. So how I'm going to start is I'm going to go pull my this is synthetic sinew waxed. I'm going to pull that across the length of my stitching holes. Then I'm going to double that up, and then I'm going to double that up again, and that'll give me, that's the minimum that I want to use, is 4 times the length of my stitching holes. So I'm going 4 times this length. That's minimum. I always, just in case, especially when I'm doing a double lock stitch or maybe a double lock stitch at the end also, it's going to take a little extra sinew, so I'll go ahead and pull another one. I'll go 5 times. I mean, this stuff is not that expensive. This one is 50 yards of this for $7.99, and normally I don't pay that. I wait till it's on sale and normally get it for about $5.99 for 50 yards. So it goes a long way, and I have found by making mistakes in the past, it's always better to have a little extra on your thread or your sinew than to come up short. When you come up short, that's a real pain. So I'll go ahead and thread 1 needle, and I'll bring it down about 2.5 inches or so and squeeze that down on the eye of the needle. And then I always want to keep that even on both ends. So I'll thread my second needle and start to fold that over, and I'll put them together so that I get them really close. How much I fold over there. Doesn't have to be perfect, but get it close. And then that will also save you some thread or sinew toward the end if you need it. So I've got my needles, one on each end. I've got them threaded. Now you could, and I've had somebody comment this in the past on one of my videos, you could go ahead and use some contact cement and cement these together if you want before you go stitch it, and that might keep it more stable. But on this small run, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to start at the top, go through both pieces with my first needle, pull that through, and then make sure that both needles are even. And I have the even amount of thread from my first hole on each side. So my needles are even. Then I can take my front needle, put it through my second hole in the front and the back, pull it through, and you can't really pull on it too hard because that sinew will slide through those holes. So just pull it to where you have all the excess pulled through. Take your second needle from the back, and I'm going to push it through that second hole that thread just went through. So I'm going to push it through the same hole I just went through, and then through the front hole. So I want to make sure I come through the same hole I just went through. And sometimes I'll take a small pair of needle nose. When you get this, it'll get a little snug to pull that needle through. And then I can pull both threads, and that'll snug that up. Now that gives me my first stitch in my first two holes. But I want to lock that in, make this twice as strong. I'll take that needle that's on the front now, go back through the first hole, front to back, pull that needle through, take my needle from the back side, you can see that's the back side with the slits for my belt, and go through the first hole back to front. I'm trying not to split any of my sinew if I can, so I'm sticking to the outside edge of my hole, and I can pull that good and tight. That locks in that stitch. I've got two stitches in there now. Now I'm going to come back through the second hole, and you can go back to front or front to back. Doesn't matter, you're going to end up doing both of them anyway. Now obviously that's going to be a little tighter even because you've got two thicknesses of thread through there. So this is the final piece. I'll pull that needle through. This is the final step that's going to lock that stitch in there. So I've got two stitches through that first two holes that's going to lock that stitch in there, make that twice as strong at the beginning or the top of that holster, because that's where it's going to take a lot of abuse and stress as you place your gun in and out of that holster, especially in. That's really going to put some pressure on that. So that takes care of that because I'm putting a double stitch in there in those first two holes and locking that in good and tight. I don't have to worry about that coming apart. So that's going to be the strongest part of this whole stitching down through here. Then I'll go to the next hole, front to back. Now that that top one is locked in, I can go ahead and pull pretty tight on these stitches as I go front to back, back to front, and do my saddle stitching. And then all I have to do is pull, snug, and lock each stitch in as I go down. So I'm not going to bore you with this as I go through this for each stitch, but I'm going to continue down through this side, and again, it's a basic saddle stitch, front to back, back to front, pull it through, and you just keep continuing down each hole. And then when I get toward the end, I'll show you how I'll lock that in at the very end. Alright, I've gotten down to the bottom of this side, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how I'm going to do a different lock stitch on the bottom. I still go from front through the front and the back, pull that needle through, I'll go from the back to the front in the last hole, pull that needle through, snug that up real good and tight. Then I'm going to go back a hole, so the next to the last hole, I'll go through front to back, pull that through and snug it up, go back to front through that second hole, that next to the last hole, pull that needle through, and it is a little tougher to get it through because it is a double stitch. Dropped one of my needles. And then here's how this is going to be a little different. I'm in the second hole next to the last hole. Now I'm going to stick my finger in here between those two pieces of leather. I'm going to go in the last hole, and I can see in there, and I'm going to turn my needle at an angle and push it out between those two pieces of leather. So I'm not going through both pieces. I'm just going through the front. And then I'm going to pull that needle through there, and at this point I can take my needle off. It doesn't have to remain on there. I'll go to the back side, do the same thing. Put my finger between those two pieces because that's locked in. It's not going anywhere. Bend that needle up at an angle and come out between those two pieces of leather. You can get a good shot of that. See how I'm coming out between instead of going through. Then I'll pull that one out. And again, I can take my needle off. I'll pull on both of those real good and tight. Make sure they're good and snug. Then all I'm going to do is tie me a square knot. Make sure it goes down inside between the two pieces of leather. Snug it real tight. Take my scissors, cut that off right at the edge. And remember, this is waxed, so it's going to leave two real tiny, you can see it sticking up there, real tiny pieces of thread. Then all I have to do is I'll take my mallet, take my lighter, I'll light my lighter and I'll move up to my sinew, let it melt just a little bit. Take the tip, you could use your needle, anything that's got a point on it. I'm using the tip of my small needle nose pliers. Push that up in there, give it a few whacks with the rubber mallet, and you can't even see it. What it does is it smashes that wax down with that thread, locks all that together, and it hides the stitch. So there, you can't see any stitch or thread at the end at the top or at the end at the bottom. So it makes a real nice, clean, finished look. So I'll go ahead, repeat the same thing on the other side, and when I get that finished, then I'll bring you back. Alright, so I've got both sides done. So I've got my pouch built for my universal holster. Here's the one that I purchased years ago. There's the one I just completed. And then what I'm going to do is right here where these two sides meet, or these two pieces meet on each end, I'm just going to moisten that just a little bit, not very much at all, just a tiny bit of moisture. I wring my sponge out, so that tells you how much moisture, not very much at all, just a tiny bit, just enough to get those two edges moist. And then I'm going to take my burnishing tool. I'm going to burnish those ends. Now I had burnished them separately before, but now once I've sewn those or stitched them together, I'm going to go ahead and burnish them together. So I'm putting a little bit of pressure, squeezing with my finger and my thumb as I use the end. Then I'll come back and use the large grooved part. And I'll do the same on the other side. And if you feel like you're not getting enough compression, just give it a little bit more moisture. Don't get it too wet, because you don't want to flatten that all out. But what that'll do is that'll slick that up real good, and I'll show you here in a minute. And it'll give it a real nice finished look on the ends. So you can see now how it gives me a real nice slick finished edge on both ends. So I'm ready to use that. You can see how nice it fits in there. It's not going to fall out, but if you had this on your belt It comes out real nice, but it fits real nice and secure. You can see it has a real narrow profile, so it's going to fit tight against your body. So there's the completed universal holster for large to medium sized guns. Now I could go ahead and put some leather sheen on it, and I probably will, just to protect it, and that will make it a little bit shinier. I did buff this leather. You can see how shiny it is already. I did buff it when I was dyeing it, so it already has kind of a shine, but this Fibings leather sheen will give it some protection also. So I'll probably do that before I actually use it, but it's ready to roll. So there's another easy to do, quick project that you could do these, make these, sell them. You could make them for yourself, whatever. But they're real handy. And again, they make for a real smooth profile if you want a personal carry using that holster. So I appreciate you coming along. If you haven't yet, I believe it's over here, please subscribe. And thank you if you have. And like I always say, please like, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.